of the Committee for Policy. Oh, sorry, we'll start that over again. Good morning, and this is a meeting, it's actually a committee meeting for policy, and we don't have a quorum today, so we can't take action on items on the agenda. It will be informational only, but we can certainly express if there is a consensus of those participating when these recommendations come before the board at a regularly scheduled meeting. With that, if you please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes. Directors, when I call your name, please indicate your presence. Director Burris. Absent. Desmond. Here. Jones. Here. Nicely. Absent. Zaragoza.
Here.
Schaefer.
Here.
Soon. Absent. Thomas.
Here.
Vega.
Here.
Vice Chair John Calvillo.
Present.
Vice Chair Vang. Absent. And Chair Gallardo. Absent.
And let the record show our chair is not here. She's actually in Germany right now on a trade mission with the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. So that is why I am presiding over today's meeting. And again, no action will be taken, but we're going to go through all the items and participate in and to provide some, at least maybe some informal direction if there are any changes or anything that's needed. So the first item on the agenda is public comment. This is an opportunity for any member to address the committee on an item that's not scheduled on the agenda. We can't take action on said items, but they can be referred to staff for future discussion at a noticed meeting. So with that said, is there any public comment?
There is no public comment.
No public comment, so we're going to close public comment and move to the consent agenda, which we cannot take action, but are there any questions on the minutes as proposed? Seeing none will reflect that there were no questions or concerns with the minutes as they at this time, and we'll defer action at our next committee meeting. All right, under action items, the first item is Policy and Innovation Committee charge. Refer to staff.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Eric Johnson, I'm the lead staff for this committee and the Deputy Executive Director of Operations here at SACOG. I wanted to start off our first meeting of the year by giving you an overview of the committee. The item before you has an overview of what is in this charge of this committee. Simply, it's the committee that you can think of as your budget, fiscal, advocacy, and internal operations committee. There are no proposed changes to the committee charge from prior years, but just wanted to again bring this to the attention as we welcome some new directors to the committee, Director Jones, Director Vega. Again, happy to take any questions if you have them about what falls in the committee and also how it operates under a normal circumstance throughout the year.
Thank you very much. And I think, as you mentioned, there are no suggested changes from the charge that was adopted by the committee last year. Committee members, are there any questions? Seeing none, it sounds, is the general consensus then that we would be supportive of the of this charge if it were to go to the board? Seeing no objection.
Yes.
Seeing no objection, we'll note that then. Okay. Next item, as for federal advocacy contract extensions, also refer to staff. Oh, as I should have said, is there any public comment on item number 2?
There is no public comment.
Thank you. Sorry about that, even though we're not taking action. Go ahead. Thank you.
I'll start over again. Can you hear me
Yes.
now? All right. Renee DeVere-Oki, part of your government affairs team. So this is now an information item today where we'll be taking it to the board and asking that the board authorize the executive director to execute amendments to our contracts with Capital Transportation Consulting and Pawelczuk and Associates. These are our federal lobbyist services. We entered into separate contracts with each of them back in April of 2021, following our normal procurement process. Their contracts do allow for extension through March of 2026, or 5 years. We're currently in year 3, so staff is recommending that we extend the contracts for 2 years at their existing rates. This would be our final contract extension for these agreements. We currently pay each $3,000 per month, consistent with the original bid, or about $36,000 per year. Over the next 2 years, we would be continuing to work on Green Beans Go advocacy, as well as appropriations language, and looking to that reauthorization that will be happening in 2026. We will be doing a future procurement in 2025. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions related to the proposed contract extension.
Thank you very much. Community members, are there any questions on this item? I don't see any. I did want to ask, and it's related to this, is that I understood that there's been a potential interest in the governor to, try to say kindly, to take back some of our Green Means Go funds, especially even those that have been awarded if they haven't been spent by a certain date. James, do you have an update about that? I'm putting you on the spot.
Chair Don Cavillo, I think we're going to hear a little, it'll be good getting that into in our advocacy updates later in the agenda.
Okay, perfect. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
Okay. Then again, committee members, is the general consensus that we're supportive of this item?
Yes, I mean, I think they've done a terrific job for us. And so I'm really hoping that we can retain their services going forward. So absolutely.
And I agree with Chair Saragosa. I always enjoy that and appreciate the information that they share with us.
Good. Okay, thank you very much. We'll note that then for the item. Next item is on the fiscal year 2022-23 annual comprehensive financial report and related audits. Oh my gosh, there was so much detail. So I applaud staff for putting this together. Thank you.
Good morning, Loretta Sue, Finance Director. So this morning, this item is for information items since we don't have a quorum. Basically, this is to seeking board approval on the approval of the annual comprehensive report for fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. SACOG, as a metropolitan planning organizations, receive federal funds directly from federal agency and also pass-through funds from Caltrans. It's required to perform an annual audit. And also SACOG, designated as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, is also required to perform an annual fiscal audit of the transit funds, which includes the LTF, the STA, and also the SGR funds. Two independent audit firms has completed the audits for both financials and then also the transit funds, and have prepared the annual comprehensive financial report, which is also known as the ACFR, for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2023. Staff is pleased to report that SACOG received a unmodified or a clean audit for both of the audits. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Carly Ransom. She is the Senior Audit Manager from I-Bailey, who audited SACOG financial statement, to kind of talk a little bit about the audit process and the requirements. And then I will wrap up with just a quick overview of the ACFR report.
Perfect. Good morning. So as mentioned, my name is Carly Ransom. I'm with I-Bailey. We are a national accounting and auditing firm, and we were engaged by SACOG to perform a financial statement audit for the year ended June 30th, 2023. So the team that worked on this audit is from our local governments division based in our Sacramento team, and the audit took around 3 to 4 months over a span of different phases. At the conclusion of our audit, we provide our audit reports that are included in SACOG's financial statements. So at this point, I was just going to quickly go over our audit reports as well as the outcomes of the audit for fiscal year 23. So our first audit report starts on page A3 of the financial statement package. And it's a couple pages with a lot of information, but on page A4, it discusses the responsibility of SACOG's management as well as our responsibility as the auditors. So management of SACOG is responsible for the preparation of the financial statements as well as maintaining proper internal controls surrounding financial transactions. So our responsibility as the auditors is to review the financial statements, perform testing procedures, and gather sufficient audit evidence in order for us to give an opinion on the financial statements. So the most significant portion of the audit report is back on page A3, the opinion paragraph, which as you read through it, it states that the financial statements present fairly the financial position of SACOG. So essentially that means that we didn't have any audit issues, and the financial statements appear to be fairly presented based off of our procedures. And ultimately we're giving a clean opinion on the financial statements. On page C5, which is, kind of in the back, this is our report on internal controls. So as I had mentioned, management of SACOG is required to maintain internal controls. So that includes segregation of duties, proper approvals and reviews of financial transactions, essentially to make sure that one person cannot take a transaction from start to finish, because that's when you run into issues. So as part of our audit, we do test and identify internal controls to make sure that they are designed and implemented correctly, as well as operating effectively throughout the year. So if we had any internal controls issues, they would be reported here. And as you read through it, we note that as part of our audit procedures, we did not identify any material weaknesses or deficiencies in internal control. And finally, on page C7, this is the audit report related to our procedures over SACOG's federal programs and expenditures of federal funds. So as SACOG receives a considerable amount of federal funding, SACOG's required to undergo an audit of those federal expenditures, as well as the compliance requirements surrounding those funds, which we perform that review as part of our financial statement review as well. So as you read through that, it'll also note that we did not have any deficiencies to report as to the use of federal funds by SACOG, and no internal control issues in that area as well. So all in all, we consider it a clean audit, no issues or misstatements noted. At this time, I can answer any questions on our audit. Otherwise, I'd like to say thank you to Loretta and your team for all the assistance you provided as we were working through the procedures.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your report. Questions from committee members? Are there any questions on the audit or any of the materials submitted therein? All right, any public comment?
There's no public comment.
Thank you. I found it incredibly thorough and very helpful. There was a lot of really interesting information, not just about SACOG, but really as it talks about the entire region with regards to jobs and homes and just so much statistical information I found very helpful. In addition to the fact that it was clean, bravo to staff for job well done throughout the year. There are so many moving parts when we're talking about SACOG in the region, but just very informative and great job. So thank you so very much for your work on that. So is there a general consensus to support this item before the board? Looks
Yes.
like so.
Thank
Okay,
you.
good. Okay, and I will note that as well. The next item on the agenda, as we're moving right along, transit representation and metropolitan planning organization structures.
Yes, this one's back to me. So one of the requirements of the federal government is that SACOG as a designated metropolitan planning organization for the 6-county region needs to represent the interests of public transit on its governing board. As you are very aware of, SACOG is a joint powers authority made up of city and county members. There are no transit agency members of SACOG. And so the way that we've been able to comply with this federal requirement is by making a resolution each calendar year that indicates that many of you do sit on transit agency boards, either as appointees of your jurisdiction or your jurisdiction runs a transit organization. So this item we bring every year at the beginning of the year to simply make that designation. And I will also note that on our website, we do indicate which board members sit on transit agency boards, and we update that list as well annually.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing no questions, any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
All right, again, I'll ask if there is a general consensus to support this item. Looks like it. All right, good. Okay, we're moving right along. Next item on the agenda would be the 2025 Blueprint Environmental Impact Report Request for Proposals.
Good morning. My name is Zach Miller. I'm the program manager for the Blueprint here at SACOG. And as a reminder, you're receiving this as an information item due to not having a quorum, and this item will be heard at the full board for approval. So SACOG is undertaking an update to the region's long-range transportation plan and land use plan, the 2025 Blueprint, and SACOG anticipates adopting the plan in late 2025. Ultimately, the plan needs to outline the transportation investment and land use strategies needed to achieve various federal, state, regional, and local requirements and policy objectives within real-world constraints, such as financial growth and regulatory constraints. So the 2025 Blueprint is subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, and SACOG must complete an environmental impact report, or EIR, for the plan to inform the public and public agency decision makers of significant environmental effects of the proposed plan, identify possible ways to minimize those effects, and describe a set of alternatives for achieving the plan's objectives. So staff recommends that the SACOG board authorize staff to release a RFP, or a request for proposal, for professional services to assist SACOG with the development of the environmental impact report for the 2025 Blueprint, and authorize the executive director of SACOG to select a vendor and negotiate and execute a contract with a not to exceed budget of $800,000. With that, I would like to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so very much. Committee members, any questions on this item? Yes. Mr. Desmond?
Thank you. I'm supportive, of course. I just had a question about, because I think there are still some discussions going on about the scenarios and some of the growth assumptions relating to the Blueprint. This is not going to preclude us from, of course, continuing those discussions. Is that correct?
In terms of growth, can you
The
elaborate
scenarios
on
within the Blueprint
that?
itself.
Oh, yeah, yeah, correct, correct.
Okay. So
Correct,
it's not
yes.
going to interfere with that.
No,
I mean, that's
they
still
will
going to be
not,
happening.
no.
And then the other question is, procedurally, will this also go to the land use committee as well for approval of the RFP, or is it just coming to our?
It's
committee?
just
Okay.
as a fiscal matter, it's coming to this committee.
Got it. Okay.
But this doesn't change the schedule at all. This is merely a matter of procurement to get this out so it's under contract so we can stay on schedule the rest of the plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's just authorizing the release versus even approving it, a contract that comes in at this point, so.
Yeah, I will note, however, Madam Chair, that the item does include the delegation of authority to the executive director. So we are asking the board for a full authorization to both develop and release the RFP and then select the firm to perform the work.
And with that said, I just wanted to encourage staff to, when the item comes before the board, to put that second bullet on the agenda, because right now the bullet just says request for proposal for the EIR. And I did note that, yes, you're also asking that we authorize the executive director to select the vendor, negotiate, and then to enter into a contract not to exceed $800,000. So I just think that's important to have that on the agenda, just for the clarification for the public as well as for the board members as well. There's those two action items. Are there any additional questions or concerns that anyone would like to raise at this time? Seeing none, any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
Thank you so very much. Okay. Is there a general consensus of support for this when it comes before the board? Looks like it. Okay, good. All right, thank you. Well, we're still in information because we couldn't take action before, but we'll move into the first official information item, which is our advocacy update and 2024 principles and policies.
All right, good morning again. Now is the fun one. So this is an information item today. So we're going to give you an update on both our federal and state lobbyists will be presenting today. We're going to let you know what's happening right now, as well as a little bit of a look ahead for the year. So include it in your your handouts or attachments A and B, which are the written reports from our state and federal lobbyists. And then if you're interested in our policies, principles, and procedures, those are attachments C and D. I'll just highlight those are basically our approach that we take when we're handling positions on different policy issues and how we keep pace with what's happening across the street as well in Washington, D.C. That's when we're providing letters of support and looking for information and how we can weigh in on different items. Okay. That's the fan. Is that better? Okay. All right. So as I say, if you have any questions on the federal side, you can reach out to me. And then I wanted to introduce Bless Shepard of our staff here. She's new. She's handling all of our state advocacy side. But I'm going to pause there and then let's flip over to the Zoom where we can get our update from our federal lobbyist. If Jason is on.
Hello.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Took me a second to unplug and do all the things we're supposed to do these days. Happy Monday. Yes, it is Monday. Happy Monday to everyone in Sacramento. I hope you all are doing well. Just want to give a brief update on the fun that we're having here in DC. It's not raining as much as it is there, but it's certainly raining action. So let me start with sort of the brief update on where Congress is right now, appropriations. Large focus of that effort right now is finishing the FY 2024 cycle. And you may be asking yourself, aren't we halfway through fiscal year 2024? And the answer is yes, we are. The current appropriation bill that is continuing resolution lasts until March 1st. There have been top line spending agreements for transportation and all the spending bills. So we do expect at this point there to be a real good attempt to try and get a fiscal year 2024 appropriation bill completed by hopefully March 1st for transportation and then March 8th for a handful of other provisions. You know, and there's a couple of things that we're working on within that bill that will help SACOG and the work that we're doing. You know, for the most part, transportation money, as we've talked about in the past, is guaranteed. So a lot of the formula dollars that we've received and are planning to spend, they're not at danger. What is sort of at danger is some of the extras. A couple of the programs that we have been targeting to helpfully move Green Means Go, a program called YIMBY, which is also called Pro Housing. We are working to have it fully funded. And also language in the bill that would direct and allow those agencies to provide funding to regional governments to create infrastructure projects that are needed for housing. So, you know, those things are moving along, and I think we'll have, you know, an outcome the next time that you all meet. You know, and that will be a hopefully a positive outcome at that time. You know, we're also getting ready for FY 25. Those appropriation requests will be coming soon. You know, with the window being that it is, usually appropriation bills are done, you know, somewhat on time, or at least, you know, a month or two late. But given how this bill will be so late, it'll put a squeeze on FY 25. Usually by now the president's budget is out. The State of the Union has commenced. There's a lot of things that have that are supposed to have occurred that haven't yet. And that largely impacts, you know, the year looking forward. So the window for FY 25 requests will be very, very narrow. I say that because many of you have earmark requests that you often look to submit. And obviously there's a lot of T's that need to be crossed and I's that need to be dotted in terms of ensuring that projects are on the tip and in the current, the appropriate planning documents. So certainly, I would say, as your individual localities are looking at FY 25 potential earmarks, you know, now is the time to be crossing those T's and dotting those I's, because my guess is the window for FY 25 will be 2 to 3 weeks long tops, and will likely begin somewhere around that March 1st with deadlines probably early to mid-March. Some offices have already begun to open their deadlines, none in our region. But nonetheless, they're beginning to sort of look ahead. That's, I think, where we're at in terms of appropriations. I will also say that this year marks the middle of IIJA, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, bipartisan transportation bill, however you want to call it. So we're beginning the process of looking at reauthorization, and that includes things that could better strengthen the Sacramento region's ability to receive more money directly, whether that's through formula programs or grants. So we've begun the work of at least parsing through, what the bill has done, what the impact has been, positive and negative, to begin to analyze what changes we should be requesting both as a region and then with our fellow stakeholders across the country, other MPOs. The final thing I want to just sort of touch base on is the outlook for the year. I know this meeting is intended to provide an outlook, and just to give you an outlook in terms of what will be happening federally. Usually election years are slow. They grind to a halt, and it's tough to think that this Congress could grind any slower. That being said, we are beginning to see some movement. I think there's a little bit of political pressure on both sides to come away with some outcomes. And I actually think the argument here will be not which party will control what and have a better chance at achieving an outcome more favorable to their side. I think you're beginning to see the debate of action versus no action really be at the core of what's happening in the federal government. We're seeing some hints of a deal on immigration and border policy, which for the first time in probably about 15 years, this is as far as we've come to at least in the Senate, a bipartisan agreement. There's a lot of doubt as to if that bill has a future. That being said, there's a lot of these bills that are moving. There's a tax bill that recently just passed that will reauthorize a housing tax credit that's very important to many of us, including in the transportation and housing world, that will be reauthorized as a part of the tax bill that has been in a bipartisan way come together, and it's passing the House and will likely pass the Senate. So you're beginning to see hints of bipartisan movement on border policy, on appropriations, on a tax bill. So while the general belief is the later we get into the calendar year, the less likely there is going to be action, I think we're flying in the face of it a little bit. And I think in the next 2 or 3 months here, you're going to begin to see, or you could begin to see some of these pieces move. Now, at any point in time, progress could stop. All it takes is one gentleman, this time not to put all the blame on Mr. Trump, but one gentleman to make a statement, and half of Congress changes the way they feel about something. So there's certainly a lot going on here. Some of it very positive. And I think the reality of it is that in the next 3 or 4 months, we could see a lot of things move. And while none of the things, or very few of the things I just talked about, really have anything to do with transportation, the bigger thing is as Congress begins to move, and if there is a vehicle that looks like it's going to move, other things get attached to it. So it's very funny how quickly a border policy bill becomes an energy bill, becomes an environmental bill, what have you. Right now, we're beginning to see some of that move. But I think once we begin to get towards April and May, the traditional slowdown of legislative activities will begin. Especially once the Republicans pick their nominee for sure, and assuming, not to assume anything, but assuming the Democrats renominate Mr. Biden, President Biden, that they will then move forward. So I think this year we're going to see a lot of action early, and then we're going to see sort of a long pause that begins about May through the rest of the summer. But that being said, that also is a good time for the authorizing committees to begin to do their planning. I met with the Transportation Committee staff on the House last week, and they are beginning to organize their thoughts on what the next bill should look like, how much it should be, how should it be reformed. So, certainly there is a lot going on under the radar in terms of reauthorization, and transportation funding. And with that, I think I'll stop. Renee, is there anything? I feel like there's 1 or 2 things that I've missed, but If there's anything else I've missed, maybe you or James could ask me to elaborate more, but I'm more than happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for your report. We appreciate it greatly. I'd like to ask committee members if there are any questions for the information that's been provided thus far. Yes, Michael Saragosa, Director Saragosa.
Thank you. And thank you for the update. We always appreciate it. A question, I mean, I know there's been some movement on the Senate side on an immigration / border bill, but do you actually see hope of the House? I know the speaker has said it's DOA, so I just didn't know if you saw something different that we've heard in the papers.
It's easy to say DOA when it's not on your doorstep. If the Senate passes a bill, which is still a big if, there's probably 50 senators literally that are swing votes right now. If the Senate passes a bill, I think there will be a lot of pressure on Republicans to do something. The reforms that are being included, quite frankly, 5 years ago, Republicans would have jumped all over. You know, it's very the needle is very much moved in their favor policy wise. You know, so I don't expect the House to take it up on their own without a lot of pressure, without it passing the Senate first. But I think if it passes the Senate, you know, I think the bravado that's being talked about becomes a little bit more challenging if we can get 60 votes in the Senate, because then if it falls apart, just to be honest, the politics of the border right now is to point at the president for inaction, right? And if the Senate passes something and the president's behind it, the narrative gets flipped a little bit, that it's the Republicans in the House that stopped anything from happening. So that takes away one of their big, you know, and the underpinning of all this is obviously aid to Ukraine, Israel, and to Palestine. So, you know, there's a lot of sort of sub elements to this discussion. But I do think if it passes the Senate, I wouldn't say it's definitely going to pass the House, but I think it becomes a little bit more of a possibility.
Understood. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, is there any public comment on this item?
Wait, we still have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We have an
do.
update from our state
states.
side.
Yes, okay.
So I'll hand
Apologize.
it off to Chris or Kiana, whichever one of you is covering.
Good morning, Chris Lee with Politico Group. Thank you for the question, Vice Chair Dowden Calvillo, on the state budget and the implications for SACOG's Green Means Go program. Definitely something we're going to discuss in detail here in our presentation. So we do have slides. I think you guys will run them on your side.
Give our tech team just a moment to upload them.
Stand by. There we go.
Great. So please advance to the next slide. Little presentation overview here. I'm going to cover items 1 and 2, the governor's proposed 2024-25 state budget, as well as where we're at in the budget process and really kind of the beginnings of what SACOG's advocacy plan could be. And then Kiana's going to cover the next 2 items, which are really more forward-looking. What are we going to see in the legislature in 2024, as well as a lot of activity that's coming up in the executive branch. Next slide, please. So here's our high-level summary of the governor's budget, really the top item lines. I think in a normal year, this wouldn't be such a point of contention, but the way that the budget was presented has created a little bit of confusion. So the governor identifies a $38 billion deficit in 2024-25, $58 billion, and I'll get into this later in the next slide if you calculate it the way the Legislative Analyst Office. So that's about a $10 billion difference between their estimate of a $68 billion shortfall. So the governor's solutions are $18.8 billion in reserves, new revenues, very small amount of new revenues and borrowing, $11.9 billion in reductions in fund shifts, $7.2 billion in deferrals and delaying expenditures to future fiscal years. And then if you count it like the LAO again, about $15 billion in K through 14 education reductions. So this next slide really digs into what are the reasons for the differences in those estimates, if we could advance it. So that peach colored bar there on the left side is the $38 billion deficit. The light blue are things that the LAO says the governor's not counting this as a cut or a reduction, but it requires action by the legislature in order for it to happen. Was there a question there?
No.
Okay, sorry. And then you get that cumulative dark blue bar there. That's the $58 billion number. So to dig into the differences between what's you could call the real budget problem, or the LAO's description of the budget problem, the LAO is projecting lower revenues than the governor. And then there's a few adjustments related to discretionary programs and reserves that exist. And so that green bar over there, that's the $68 billion deficit. So at least that's a pretty sizable difference, especially when we have some programs that are slated for reductions in the governor's budget, but it's not quite as distinct as a 38 billion versus 68 billion. A lot of that is related to how spending levels in the budget are treated. Are they cuts or are they baseline? So really, we're kind of zoomed in around a $58 to $68 billion budget problem to solve. Next slide, please. So we want to talk to you a little bit about the question that already came up, as well as really the key items in SACOG's purview as a transportation and land use and housing planning agency. What are the key budget solutions in those program areas? And has already been alluded to by Director Dowden Calvillo, the Regional Early Action Planning Grant 2.0 program, REAP 2.0, is slated for a $300 million reversion from $600 million that was dedicated to the program way back in fiscal year 2021-2022. As you know, it took a little bit of time for HCD to get the program up and running. I think SACOG was one of the earliest jurisdictions, if not the earliest, to get approval for their overall plan for how you were going to use that REAP 2.0 funding. And I think part of the reason for that is all of the work that went into creating the Green Means Go program. This is the key funding source for Green Means Go and SACOG. All we've really seen so far is some initial guidance from the Department of Housing and Community Development. And they're saying that pending resolution of the budget, they're not going to reimburse more than 50% of each grant award. And this is, interesting, difficult to handle sort of directive. I was just pulling up information about the awards. Of the $600 million that was available for the program, at least 406 had been awarded. It's unclear how much of their technical assistance funding was used, but the funding that's already been approved and signed off on by HCD exceeds that $300 million reversion. And this 50% guidance, the messaging that's been going along with that is basically, we're going to treat each grantee the same. Everybody's going to have a 50% haircut, regardless of how far along you are in the process, right? And there are definitely differences. As I said, $510 million was dedicated to MPOs. As of October or November, which is when HCD last updated their website chart, there was only 406 awarded. But again, very difficult because in the SACOG region, for instance, where a lot of funding was dedicated to capital projects, where most of the grant agreements had been executed, I think 24 out of 25 or 25 out of 26, James can correct me, very far along. I'm going to touch a little bit on the other housing cuts, and we'll kind of come back to this core issue related to Green Means Go and REAP 2. So other cuts, $200 million reversion from the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program out of $225 million for the program this year, and then about $700 million in cuts to other housing programs. Let's go to the next slide. Transportation, not quite as dire, but still some significant changes here. So as you recall, there were two $2 billion awards spread over 2 years. I said that correctly. $1 billion of that is delayed in the governor's budget from 2024-25 to 2025-26. And then there's a small fund shift, 261.4 million to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. That won't change the program. But basically, SACOG is going to receive the same amount of funding from this population-based transit intercity rail capital program in the current year. And then in the budget year, 24-25, half as much funding is anticipated, and that remaining half pushed out to 25-26. There's a $200 million reduction in the active transportation program. They're doing that from out years, so it won't affect currently awarded grants. And then in the Transit Intercity Rail Capital Program competitive grants, another shift to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, to cap and trade. Next slide, please. I wanted to talk a little bit about process and then start to dip our toes into what is the advocacy plan and how can we get SACOG member jurisdictions engaged. So constitutional deadline, January 10th for the budget to be released. Legislative budget hearings are now underway. So this item will likely not be heard in the Assembly until April 9th. All the subcommittee hearings were in the file last week. So we have quite a bit of time. I think this is a complicated issue. There's a lot of organizing going on around the housing proposed cuts. We've seen some NASCAR letters with a lot of organizations raising concerns. And so typically some of the more controversial items get put into the later agendas. As of last Friday, I haven't looked at the file this morning. The Senate Budget Subcommittee hearings were not in the file, so we don't know when they will take up HCD's budget, which is where this item would be. Looking forward to the process, May 15th, the May revision, governor's updated revenue estimates will come out. I think that's really important to note because number one, we've already seen the discrepancy between the LAO and the governor. LAO is projecting lower revenues. In terms of some of the revenues that are coming in, withholdings from personal income tax, we're seeing continued weakness in those revenues as those numbers come out. So we may be looking at a situation in May where we have additional cuts to make rather than, thinking about restorations. After that May revise, there'll be another round of budget hearings. The legislature will come together and have a budget proposal. They need to pass a budget by that June 15th deadline in order to continue to get paid. So we've seen that happen since Prop 25 passed several years ago and changed the threshold for the votes. But what we've also seen is that the final budget in recent years has really trailed, and it's been complex to follow because multiple versions of the budget bill going into print. We've had, 5+ quote unquote budget bill juniors, which are just making little line item adjustments to that budget bill, and then trailer bills. So June 15th is the real deadline. They want to have that budget adopted before the fiscal year. They want to keep getting their paychecks, but a lot of items will continue into the summer and fall if recent years are any indication. Next slide, please. So budget advocacy, what are we working on? What is the plan? So I've really divided this up into 4 steps here, and step 1 is underway right now. So educating the SACOG delegation about the impacts of these cuts, working with your staff, put together a great budget letter that went out to all the key legislative officials, Department of Finance, budget committees, as well as each of the members of your delegation. With the information that your staff's provided, we're following up with each of those delegation members, starting first with those who are serving on the budget committees and giving them localized information. What are the projects and plans in your district that are going to be impacted by this cut? And then regional coalition building, engaging with other groups. This is something where if you have partners whether it's in the housing development space, whether it's equity groups, whether it's business groups, engaging them so that they know that this major priority for the SACOG region is potentially at risk, not potentially, it is at risk. Getting non-traditional partners engaged in the process and reaching out to the legislature is something that's going to be helpful. The other part of this is we need to develop a solution with our partners. I think with the continued weakness we're seeing in revenues, I don't know that it's going to be sufficient this year to just say, don't cut this. I think we're going to have to look at creative solutions. There's bond measures out there. There's special fund shifts that could potentially happen. But as we'll see in the next slides, I think that collaboration with CalCog, with other regions who are impacted around the state, is going to be an important part of the process. And then this is all done with a goal of getting the committees to take action on whatever that solution we develop is in the subcommittee and final budget process for the legislature. We want to get our solution on the table. We want it to be part of negotiations between the speaker, the pro tem, and the governor's office. And that's really the final step here. So a solution needs to be included in the final deal between both houses and the governor in order to protect these funds for the SACOG region. Next slide. So this is a little bit what I'm talking about, and I've taken the liberty of telling people that now they are from a MPO and not a city. So we've got, for the Assembly Committee that will hear this, we've got Quirk Silva, D. Skagg, we've got Assemblymember Ward, D. Sandag, and we have from our delegation, Joe Patterson, our SACOG, and then similar sort of makeup on the Senate side, Sandag again representative with Senator Steve Padilla, and then Senator Caballero, who represents Fresno, Madera, and Merced counties. A nice thing about having her on the committee is Kiana and I also represent MCAG in Merced County. And if you guys recall, last year we were able to highlight the Green Means Go program in Senator Caballero's Governance and Finance Committee. Your staff did a really great presentation in a hearing that she convened about local infrastructure needs. And so she will be familiar with what SACOG is doing. And I think with our representation of MCAG, we'll be able to fold messaging from SACOG and MCAG together and really make it relevant to her, not just from her district, but from her statewide perspective as someone who cares a lot about housing and infrastructure issues. And then
Chris, I'll ask a quick question here. Do you anticipate any changes on budget sub 4? I mean, I know we've all been waiting to see what's going to happen in the Senate. I don't know if you had heard anything on these members.
I'm hoping not, because I think this is a good lineup for us. Yeah. Kiana's going to talk a little bit about the transition that's slated for today. We've certainly heard rumors about Senator Caballero potentially chairing a different committee than Governance and Finance, but I'm hoping budget doesn't shake up too much. And you know, Senator Skinner's been a really steady hand. She was around, if I recall correctly, during the last era when we're making budget cuts. So we will see, and Kiana might have more to add on this, but we'll touch on that next in the presentation.
Gotcha.
And
thank you, Chris.
Go ahead.
No, I was saying thank you. Appreciate it.
And then again, on the minority party, Senator Niello representing the SACOG region. So we've already shared with him the budget letter, but also project impacts in his district and across the region. So part of this is just, these are the committees that are going to literally initially take action on the HCD proposal. We want them to reject the cut, and we want to lobby these folks to put a solution on the table and get that into the mix as the budget process is developed. So really interacting with our Southern California and Central Valley partners and with CalCog is going to be vital as we develop a strategy for averting these cuts. Next slide, please. Yeah, and so actually there's Director Zaragoza, there's the transfer right here. So Kiana's going to take over. I'll see if she has any additional comments about kind of our budget advocacy, but it does flow right into kind of the look ahead to 2024.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone. making sure you all can hear me. I think I'm getting a little feedback, but okay, sounds good. Thank you, Chris, for a really thorough assessment of state budget and what we're working on behalf of SACOG. I don't really have too much to add by way of the budget presentation, but to highlight the fact that we really are focused on figuring out what other non-traditional or even to some degree traditional partners outside of CalCog, CSAC, the league, can we work with to advance our goals in terms of avoiding REAP cuts, backfilling them with another source, whether it be bond or something else. So in particular, working with the transportation construction industry, our labor and business partners, because I think they recognize how vital these monies are to unlocking land to build housing that connects residents to alternative modes of transportation and makes the entire multimodal transportation system work, thereby, meeting greenhouse gas emissions goals. We are really aligned with the industry, I think, as you know, particularly from your other hat that you wear. And so we're actively working with those folks too. I think honestly, what Chris has covered so far was really the most important information we wanted to deliver today. But since we are before you and it is our first presentation of the year, we just wanted to touch briefly on some other higher level observations as well with you all. So as everyone is well aware now, the Assembly speakership transitioned in the summer of 2023. But it wasn't until after the Thanksgiving holiday that we saw Speaker Rivas make new appointments to various leadership positions and committee chairs, and then build out committee membership. And so this is really the first time we are seeing Assemblymember Gabriel take the gavel of the Budget Committee in the Assembly and the leadership team working together. So just wanted to highlight that fact that we are sort of getting to know this new speaker, this new suite of leaders in the Assembly as they undertake an entire legislative cycle, as well as really take on a very difficult budget for the first time. And in the Assembly, most of these members have not, in fact, had to deal with a budget where there are significant deficits and real cuts. And so it is definitely going to be an interesting year. With respect to the Senate leadership transition, Senator Mike McGuire from the North Coast, former county supervisor from Sonoma County, is taking over from Tony Atkins, Senator Tony Atkins from the San Diego region today in the Senate. Unlike the Assembly transition, the Senate transition is much more collegial and collaborative. There was not a big fight for who would take over. And so to that end, it is really unclear how many leadership positions and ultimately committee chairs and membership are going to change. So unfortunately, I don't have too much more to add other than the observation of where Caballero lands. I'm guessing we see some changes, but it will not be wholesale change like we saw in the Assembly, right? This is the second year of a 2-year session. It's February 5th, so really the impacts of that have already mostly taken place. But as you are likely familiar, in the second year of a 2-year session, bills introduced in the first year that are still in the House of Origin at the start of the second year are eligible to move, but there are very tight deadlines. So by January 31st, last Wednesday, bills that were in their House of Origin needed to make it to the other house in order to continue on. So we saw, honestly, a lot of bills die. Oh, and that is sort of consistent with second year activity. It is a harder threshold for bills to sort of make it through that process in that short time. So of course, we are regularly working with your staff and you all to analyze bills and make sure you know what's moving, what's critical, and what needs our attention in a timely fashion. As you all know as well, it's an election year. I was listening to NPR this morning and just the multitude of stories going on primaries, both at the national level, and we heard, of course, your interesting and always informative update from your federal team, and there's just a lot of activity throughout the state of California as well. So that is always an aspect to the legislative process. I would observe that things become a little bit more moderate in nature in terms of proposals in the legislature when it is an election year. So we shall see how that shakes out. The bond issue is one I think Chris and I are really interested in is on your behalf because of the potential to serve as a solution to REAP cuts if we are able to potentially fold that into one of the resource climate or housing bonds. That's an option we want to keep on the table, but also just what makes it through the process over the next few months. And then I'll just highlight quickly, we anticipate seeing significant proposals on the interface of transportation and climate change in the 2024 legislative session again. Assemblymember Friedman's AB 6 and 7 are two-year bills that are in the second house. So those are eligible to be amended and modified and taken up later this year. So we'll be working with her office to understand that. And we've talked with our colleagues that represent environmental equity and advocate folks, and they're working on ideas for how to reshape grant programs that are of interest to SACOG. And so we've just got our ear to the ground right now as we're waiting for bill introductions through the deadline of February 18th. Chris, I think I got that date right, February 18th. Next slide, please. Lastly, I will just highlight a couple of executive branch activities that I think are sort of complementary to everything going on in the legislature. The State Transportation Agency just released its final climate action plan for transportation infrastructure, or CAPTI annual report, highlighting really significant progress, at least from my perspective, in terms of reducing GHGs and other climate-related impacts from transportation programs. That being said, from other perspectives, there has been a lot of criticism that not enough progress has been made. And so they are endeavoring to update CAPTI this year, and that is a stakeholder process that your staff will obviously engage in, and Chris and I will be a part of as well. Chris has been the lead on the Regional Housing Needs Allocation Process report, so I'll ask him to chime in if I miss anything, but there is a report forthcoming that is going to make a series of recommendations on how to reform the RHNA process that we will be actively watching and engaging in. The CTC just started last week a series of workshops to update the guidelines for future funding rounds on the SB1 programs enumerated on your slide deck. And then I think for the first time in my history of working on transportation issues, the SHOP guidelines may be potentially contentious this year. As we have seen with headlines about the appropriate nature of how you combine SHOP funds with other funds to make investments on the state highway. So we will follow those things. The ITIP hearings to approve 2024 ITIP dollars in the STIP, those final hearings were last week, and we monitored both of those. I did not hear any significant criticism or concern from folks on those final proposals. And so again, Chris or James, chime in if you think differently, but I anticipate, knock on wood, as always, approval of those documents at the March meeting in the March CTC meeting in San Jose. So I think with that, we have taken up quite a bit of your time, but we hope that this has been informational, and I will pause there and see if there are any questions or concerns.
Thank you very much. Certainly quite a bit happening out there. So appreciate the detailed report from both of you. I'd like to open this up. Are there any questions or comments from the committee members at this time on the information? Yes.
So I'm looking to gain some clarity on already allocated funding from Green Means Go. Is that safe, or is that still, if it's allocated, can it be still drawn back, or can you provide some clarity on that, please?
This is Chris Lee from Politico Group. So it is a very confusing issue because the appropriation was in the fiscal year 21-22 budget. In early 23, SACOG's plan was approved by HCD. And amongst the large MPOs, $406 million out of $510 million was similarly awarded by November of 2023. So we know, even if the proposal were to say we're just going to freeze in time what was already awarded, we know that there's more awarded than is proposed to be retained in the program in the governor's budget. And so as best as I know, and James and the program staff can correct me because I haven't seen anything else from HCD on this, the guidance that we have is that how they are implementing that proposed budget cut is a 50% cap on reimbursement under those current awards. And so that's the best information we have now. I think one of the things we'll do in the budget process and when these items are before the budget subcommittees, and I'll say Assemblymember Patterson's office has already told us they're very interested in getting questions from us to put before the administration. And obviously we will also do that before April 9th. But that's the best guidance that we have at this moment, unless James or his program staff, basically a 50% reduction in reimbursement. What that means for your actual projects is something that we need to understand from SACOG staff and from local jurisdictions.
And just to follow up on that, so the city of Auburn received, Green Means Go, and we haven't actually spent any of it. So we're very much in line to lose 50%. But if it's the utilization of those funds, is there a date certain where it then becomes 50%? I mean, in other words, they're not going to go back and try to get money that's already been reimbursed, correct? I mean, it's the 50% of those funds that have not been reimbursed by date certain. We don't know what that date certain is, right?
Right, because this is funding that's already been appropriated, it would be for any current expenditures, right? So I suspect that given that guidance, that there aren't any awards that are more than 50% reimbursed already, but there could have been cost where you haven't sought reimbursement, and we don't know that, and frankly the department doesn't know that. So James, I don't know if you have more to add on that topic.
Only really just to make sure that everybody understands the needle that we're trying to thread here. On the one hand, as many of you know, this is just the governor's proposed budget, right? And so what we are mindful of you doing at the local level, since interestingly, yes, many of you sitting around that board table have Green Means Go grants in your jurisdictions, is not putting a halt right when perhaps you're going out to bid or we're in construction season and we want to get the work done. At the same time, you saw the budget forecast. It is not good, right? And I think, so we want to share this information with you now. I think our most important task before us is advocacy, and to try to hold on to some of those funds. We were the first region in the California to get the approval by HCD. We are now out and under contract with almost all our jurisdictions, if I'm not mistaken. Where that work is in the process, I'm not sure. What that means, if that budget cut goes all the way through the final budget, I don't think we know that yet. So we don't want you to halt work. At the same time, we want to make sure that you all are aware this is a pretty major threat.
Thank you very much. I mean, we received 2 grants and one we've done nothing. So that's very problematic for us, and I'm sure that some of my colleagues are in the same boat. We have been able to, I think, get reimbursement for one of ours, but the others we haven't even done the work yet. So, but other questions or comments from yes, Director Jones.
Director Jones, if you could press your microphone button.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Used to this. This is for Chris. With regards to the cut in the budget, do you know if mental health care grants are going to be affected? If so, how much? I mean, I'm sure they probably will be.
That's something we can get back to our colleagues. We have a subcontract with folks who are heavily involved in the health and human services. So nothing comes to mind except for there's significant changes to mental health programs that are on the ballot. March 1, there's a bond issuance, but also there's changes to the Mental Health Services Act from, I believe, 2004, renaming it the Behavioral Health Services Act, and then creating new criteria for how money is being spent. There is some concern with various folks in the mental health community about changing those parameters for how counties spend the money, including a requirement that 30% go towards housing might mean cuts to outpatient services and other programs. But other than that, I'm not aware of any programmatic changes, and we can pull up our colleagues' budget summary and share that with you if that's helpful.
Okay, and the other question I had for you is you mentioned that there was a change in the threshold for the vote to approve the budget. I'm just curious, I've not been that involved in budgeting.
Yeah, and that was about 10 or 15 years ago. So in the, before that time, which I think is around 2010 or so, the budget required a 2/3 approval. And at that time, the legislature, the Democrats did not have a supermajority. So since Prop 25 passed, the Democrats have been able to pass with a simple majority the budget bill. And so that is a difference, right? So now when we see negotiations, it really is three-party negotiations between the Democratic leadership and the governor. Back in the days of Schwarzenegger and the smoking tent, it was the big five. Now it's really the big three.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? All right, I don't see any. Any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
Okay, even though it's informational, always giving the public the opportunity to participate is a good thing. Okay, well, thank you very much. I really appreciate the update. There's a lot of work to be done this year. And as you mentioned, during an election year, it just makes it even more convoluted, if you will. So lots of moving parts, and we very much look forward to your future updates as well. And thank you so very much. So thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the next item under information. And this is the Mega Region Working Group Meeting Summary.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, directors. Just want to announce, right, not only are you Chair this morning, Director Dowden-Cavillo, you're also the newest appointed Mega Region Working Group member, so thanks for attending. Yeah, again, my name is Dustin Foster. I'm on the transportation team. I'm a staffer for the Mega Region. Yeah, just providing a brief information update on the Mega Region, where the meeting last month, as well as where we're headed and our priorities for the year. So SACOG's 4 representatives to the Mega Region this year include Director Dowden-Cavillo, as well as returning representatives, Directors Bradford, Joyner, and Kozlowski. The first Mega Region Working Group meeting was held on Friday, January 26th. Now, to back up, the Mega Region is a partnership between SACOG and our neighboring can you hear me okay? Okay, great. And our neighboring regions, San Joaquin Council of Governments, or SJCOG, and our neighbors in the Bay Area, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, or MTC. We each have 4 representatives. We meet on shared transportation and other priorities. We advocate to the state legislature together, and we rotate the leadership every year. So SACOG was the leader. We were in the chair role last year. Director Bradford, former Director Bradford, former Director Gore did a great job chairing last year. So let's see. So this year, the chair will be representing SJCOG. It's Gary Singh, the mayor of Manteca. And from MTC, the vice chair is Commissioner Nate Miley, supervisor for Alameda County. So the focus of the meeting in January was on managed lanes throughout the Mega Region and the state. MTC kicked off the panel sharing information on the Bay Area's robust express lanes program, all the express lanes in the region, how it was planned, the operations of it, the governments, and a lot of lessons learned because they've been doing this for a few decades longer than us. Our colleague Kathleen Hanley on the transportation team has been doing a lot of work lately to establish the region's regional tolling authority, the Capital Area Regional Tolling Authority, or CARTA, to oversee the governance of our future tolls. She did a great job. Staff consulting for SJCOG discussed the I-205 Managed Lanes project in San Joaquin County. And then finally, Caltrans headquarters staff spoke about how Caltrans is really supporting regions throughout the state in developing road pricing projects, which would include the Yellow 80 improvement project, which is one of the mega region priorities. The next item of interest, SJCOG consulting staff talked about plans for the second annual Sacramento Lobby Day. This is a big priority for Representative Gore, Supervisor Gore last year, to really kick off an in-person lobbying trip here for all the representatives from the mega region to meet here in Sacramento, talk to state staff from the legislature as well as the state agencies. It was a lot of success last year, so our hope is to bring it back this year in either March or April, just finding a date that works for the group. Really talking about policy and funding priorities, including the mega region dozen projects, which is our dozen project priorities across the mega region. I was asked in an effort of paying it forward to our SJCOG colleagues who are at a CTC meeting that day, really to talk about the funding updates and sharing the successes of 2023 and all the funding awards for the mega region dozen projects. So this includes 2 of MTC's projects. They were freight projects focused on improving freight in the region. The I-80 truck scales project in Cordelia was fully funded, as well as the Port of Oakland Green Power Grid. So 2 of the mega region dozen project priorities, they're off the list. They're getting the stamp, fully funded, moving on to construction. Very exciting. In our region, the Capital Corridor Third Track Project Phase 1 received full funding across a couple programs last year. So now they are actually moving forward to the design for Phase 2. So that's staying on the mega region dozen, but Phase 1 is moving forward. We're keeping Phase 2 on to support that getting fully funded over the next few years. Finally, SJCOG State Route 99 and 120 Connector Project Phase 1 received a full allocation of State Transportation Improvement Program, or STIP, funds. And so SJCOG is now continuing work on that project, Phase 1B. So very exciting for those 4 of the 12 projects getting support from the state. And, our advocacy hopefully helped support that. So with that, I thank you for your patience and your attention, and be happy to answer any questions or hear any comments. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, and good job at the mega region meeting. It was my first meeting, and really found it very informative and very, it was quite topical, given that we talked about managed lanes throughout the mega region area, and we had just taken action on our own here in SACOG's jurisdiction. So interesting lessons learned from others, and had some questions with regards to funding, their subsidized funding for those lanes and so forth. So thank you so much. Are there questions from the committee members? I don't see any. Any public comment on this item?
There's no public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you again, and looking forward to hearing more about the annual lobbying day either in March or April. So thank you. All right, next item is just receive and file. We have the quarterly reports on contracts. If there's any questions, you can see staff. And under other matters, I just wanted to bring up, and I think that you might have provided this in the during our for new members orientation, but I thought it might be helpful if we just had like a cheat sheet that listed all of the different funding grants and programs, for example, the STA and others, where it spells out what it is and what the funding mechanism is, or the criteria for funding. For example, it's a quarter, like I'll just say here for, the statewide gas and diesel tax, 50% based on population, 50% based on transit operation review from the final fiscal year. The LTF is local transportation fund. it'd be great maybe if we had that just in our packet that just, again, went through all the different funds or the grants and then what that criteria is for funding or the funding source also. So if it's a 0.25% sales tax, how does it get its funding? Because there are so many, right? And so that was just
Yeah.
something I wanted to.
Yes,
And that's the other difficulty is even their criteria changes. And so those of us that have been around a long time that may know exactly when you say LTF or this or that, it changes. I mean, so I think it'd just be really informational, sort of a glossary. I know with Pioneer Community Energy, we use a tremendous amount of acronyms and things of that nature, and we do have kind of that glossary. But I just want to go one step further and just talk about how each one is funded and then what the criteria is for us to then, or the state to fund. So.
Yeah, we will certainly strive to do that. I think one of the ideas that we've had is holding an informational session where we can kind of walk through some of those things, right? Because at a simple level, right, you pay for gas taxes when you fill up at the pump. Some of that kind of goes through the federal mechanisms, others go through the state mechanisms. And so some of those dollars do land here at SACOG, others go to your communities. So we want to give you an explanation of both what's here in the SACOG context and what's there overall. So we've heard this request as well. We are updating our board handbook. And so that does give you at least the definition of the acronyms, but I take your point. It doesn't tell you exactly what does LTF mean, how much money are we getting, and what are the decisions. So happy to help you with that.
I liked what was in the audit on page A35 of the audit. It kind of did a general breakdown of just some of the really big ones.
Right.
And so something like that for us would just be great. And if it was just always in our packet, it's always there. And so we can look it up or what have you, just food for thought as I was going through my packet. And again, I really liked what was done on page A35 of the audit. And that's really what sparked my thought process on this. Are there any other matters before us? Any other comments by committee
I
members?
think the executive director has something online.
Yes.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, Vice Chair Dowden Cavillo, committee members, just a couple of things to wrap up. Next week, we'll have the board meeting here, the SACOG boardroom. So February 15th, two of the main items there are going to be a deep dive on the blueprint that our land use committee got last week, and then a refresher on our racial equity action plan, our race equity inclusion initiative. So that's coming up next week. And then in March, we will have the first of our offsite board meetings this year. And I want to make sure you got that on your calendar because our hosts are very excited to host us, and that is the City of Woodland in Yolo County. So Thursday, March 21st, we are doing a board tour before the board meeting this time because after sometimes it's hard to keep you. So bright and early for your El Dorado County representatives or you Auburn folks and Placer County, we'll get you the actual time, but 8-ish in Woodland. So I know that's bright and early, but we're gonna have a really interesting tour on infill, potential Green Means Go, and then a lot around food and ag, everything from food and ag, Center for Land-Based Learning, Ag Start, which is an incubator in downtown Woodland, Research and Tech Park Woodland's working on. As folks from Yolo County have told us, you can't come to Yolo County without talking food and ag. So, so please make sure that's on your calendars. And then if you have not yet, let us know which dates you're available for the Denver trip that Chair Saragosa has asked you all to express your interest for. Please let us know soon. We're trying to settle on a date, and we want to announce that before the board meeting next week. So
Great. Thank you very much, and we hope that you feel better soon. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other items? Seeing none, I will hereby adjourn our meeting. Thank you, everybody.